Journey to Becoming podcast is all about the changes, transitions, and transformations we encounter on our journey to aligning with purpose and living life with intentionality, fulfillment, and impact. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and my mission is to help those starting their entrepreneurial journeys or simply shifting gears to better align with purpose by sharing the journeys of others, offering practical tips and strategies, and providing encouragement to help you pull through whatever obstacle is standing in your way. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and join me on this journey of discovery. Joining me on this episode of the Journey to Becoming podcast is Jennifer JJ Jank. JJ works with those who want to be more productive and spend more time on the life side of the work-life balance. She trains high-growth teams so they can deploy high-performance strategies to work smarter. She is also a speaker on various topics, including productivity, personal finance, and entrepreneurship. She is also an author of several books, including Zero to Savvy, A Quick Guide to Investing, Get What You Deserve, The Ultimate Guide to Divorce Finance, and Make the Leap from Employee to Entrepreneur, your easy and effective handbook to unlock the secrets of savvy business owners. Welcome to the show, JJ. So excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Sabine. I'm really excited to be on your podcast.
Great. Would love to hear about you, about your journey to becoming who you are today, this accomplished author and speaker.
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of joke that I was in finance for a couple of decades. I was one of those people who never really knew exactly what they wanted to do. So my undergrad degree is actually in physics, so natural fit for finance, obviously. And and then I decided I wanted to be in the business area, and I got my MBA, and then I worked in finance for a couple of decades. And then I had my my midlife crisis, and I had spent the last decade of my career mostly in personal finance, so personal financial planning, helping people with their financial plans kind of thing. And I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. And I started doing my writing. I'd always been a writer the whole time. Even when I was a financial planner, I'd take the occasional workshop or conference or whatever on writing. And so when I decided that I needed to start my own business, I decided that I would start writing. And what I ended up doing a lot of were the business books or nonfiction books. And when I had left financial planning, I actually had started researching the brain, just because I was always trying to figure out why people would not do what we asked them to do in the financial plan. And we'd be in the financial planning meetings, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. We're going to do that," and never do it. And so it's obviously a behavioral thing. So there's a whole arm of finance called behavioral finance. And I kind of started to get into that and really learning about the brain. And then when I got into the writing, well, it turns out that a lot of the stuff I was doing also just ended up being about, or I was able to find a way to put neuroscience into it, because I wrote about project leadership and project management and leadership and all that kind of stuff in some other books that really relied heavily on knowledge about the brain. So as I was doing all this work, I was just learning all of this stuff about neuroscience. And then I noticed also that I was very productive while I was writing. I can write an enormous number of words an hour, which is good for a ghostwriter, because that just means that you spend less time writing because you can put so many words to the page. So that was really good for me. And that was just kind of how it always worked. And then as I was reading more about the brain, I sort of understood that accidentally, it turns out that I was doing the things that are good for supporting the brain, which is one of the reasons why I'm so productive. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and a lot of people were asking, well, how do I be productive? Some of it's a mindset. You and I have kind of talked about the mindset stuff, which is very important. And I think a lot of people don't realize what the brain actually is, how it really works. And so in order to be productive, it's not really about the systems. It's not about downloading another app, right? Because everybody already has 75 on their phone. You don't need to do that most of the time. Obviously you do need to have some systems that kind of back you up. So most business owners need like a customer relationship management system just to smooth that. But on top of that, it's really all about understanding how your brain works, because some people have more energy for this kind of concentrated, focused work in the morning, early in the morning. Some people have it a little bit later in the morning. A lot of people were so used to the 8-hour workday that a lot of people don't realize that this kind of focused thinking type, heavy concentrating work is actually limited. You can only get about 3 to 4 hours of it in any given day. So, because the 8-hour day was based on a factory floor where you're just making widgets, which you can do. You can do mindless stuff for 8 hours a day. That's not a problem. But if you're doing all this thinky, I call it the thinky stuff. It's a technical term. All this thinky stuff, you're only getting 3 to 4 hours of that a day. So how do you maximize that? And there are ways to maximize it. The other thing is that your brain can really only handle heavy tasks for about an hour at a time. So it's not like you can do 4 hours, just grind. That's actually not the productive way to do it. The productive way to do it is concentrate for about an hour, take a little break, 15 to 20 minutes, go back for another hour, take a little break, do this during your most focused energy time, which for most people is in the morning. And there are some other things that are actually unproductive that support your productivity, such as play. I think play is so important. And I don't have my kitty up here now, but I do have a cat who will be 2 on the 4th of July. And so you can see with cats, especially with kittens, right? You have to kind of wear them out if you want them to sleep or rest at any time, and they need to play. And it's actually true for adults too. You need to play. And people are not used to that. Like, we're into this whole grind away for 12 hours a day, wake up and do it again. And kind of mixing up busy and productive, because those two are not the same things. And we've kind of gotten into this busy thing, but if you want to have results, really you need to get into the productive things. That's what I help people do.
That's awesome. You've said so many really, really good things. As you were talking, you reminded me, there's this model. It starts with a P, and it's escaping me right now. The whole time chunking, basically, of like working. Pomodoro. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. I immediately went to that because that's how I structure my day. But I do it 90 minutes of straight work and then 30-minute break. So I'm glad to know that I'm in the right company in terms of what I'm doing. But so much you said there, oftentimes, especially for entrepreneurs and more so too for anyone who is just really highly ambitious, highly goal driven, there's this narrative around, doing more and completing more makes you more effective, makes you more productive. But the way that you've just broken it down, it's actually doing less in concentrated periods of time is what actually allows you to get more done and get you to be more productive and allows your mind to actually work with you instead of against you. So I love that breakdown there. Now, going back to you personally, I know you mentioned that the catalyst was your clients realizing that the clients were facing some level of resistance, right? When you would tell them to do something, there'd be resistance and they wouldn't do it. So that kind of, sparked your interest to say, okay, well, how do I get them to understand? How do I influence, essentially? And you will say stumbled, but, we don't believe in coincidences here. And you stumbled into this, this whole methodology of productivity, of less stress and overall better well-being, it sounds like. So how have you been able to apply this for your life personally to, make shifts coming out of finance and, very, very intense environments?
Some of it's been a journey. Actually, one thing that COVID really helped me with was, and I think this is probably mostly my personality, but some of it could have been because I've been in the finance world for so long, and you just have this desire to control things. And then when things don't go your way because they're completely out of your control, but you're kind of refusing to admit that because you don't want to think about not having control, then that's what gets you freaked out. So if I can, I'm going to sound like a giant nerd here, but I'm going to borrow from Shakespeare. he has Hamlet say in whichever, I don't remember which act it's in, but he says, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that's really what it's all about, is a situation, but how I think about it makes a difference as to whether I think it's a bad situation or a good situation. I mean, the thing is going to happen, however it's going to happen. And so COVID actually helped me with that, because for once, it was very clear to me that I had no control over what was going to happen. The virus was spreading, and it seemed clear by following the science that there were a few things like masking up and staying socially distanced and stuff, that if you sort of followed along with what was going on, you could see. But that doesn't, the fact that you can protect yourself against it and have the vaccinations, as you and I both have, that doesn't necessarily mean that COVID is going to stop tomorrow, or it's going to stop after the next person gets the vaccines. There's a lot that's uncontrollable with that, and we can do what we can. And I was happy to do what I could. But it just really made me let go of a lot of my control issues. And I think the productivity work, or it's probably more the neuroscience work, is also the same. The clients wouldn't necessarily the funny thing about them was they wouldn't necessarily have obvious resistance. Like, we'd say, oh yeah. And these were people of means. So when we said, well, you could save, I don't know, $10,000 more a year or whatever, they could do it. It wasn't that we were asking them to do something that they couldn't do. They told us they thought it was a great idea. Yeah. And even when we dangled the carrot and said, oh, you're going to have a great retirement if you can just save X more dollars for the next X more years, which is all behavioral finance. And as I learned about it, I learned about my brain, and I learned about why I did things, because sometimes I'd be like, well, I know what the answer is and I'm not doing it. Like my clients, although bizarrely, I'm extremely rational about finances. I can take the emotion out of a financial decision very easily, but I can't do that in all areas of my life. So there are some areas where I was really making all these emotional decisions. And so learning about the brain, also helped me with the productivity, but also helped me understand where some of this stuff was coming from. And another thing that was like a huge thing for me, and especially because you talked about me coming from the world of finance, and it is kind of a buttoned down kind of conservative world. And I've always, on all the personality tests, and I know there are issues with those, but on all the personality tests, I always come out as like a logical thinker. Turns out, after all this, research that I've done into the brain, turns out that even us logical thinkers, our brains, our conscious brains, are not making most of the decisions. Most of the decisions are happening on a subconscious level. So we're not aware of what's going on. And actually, the brain is extremely active on a subconscious level. Like, I'm sure you have the same thing where your mind is just racing, and, people talk about trains of thought. And I'm like, great, I've got 6 trains all, about to head into each other and explode. And you think of your conscious mind as something that's really busy because you have all this stuff going on in it. And it's actually your subconscious mind is doing so much. And that's why one of I call them the unproductive productivity habits, is sleep. And you think of, oh, well, sleep can't be productive. And not during work, probably the boss is not going to want you to sleep while you're working, I'm guessing.
Right.
But it's actually, there's a lot of stuff that happens while you're sleeping. And there's 3 stages of sleep, and different things happen in the different 3 stages, which is why if you don't get enough sleep, you're not getting enough of the cycles. And so you're missing out on some of this stuff. One of the things that happens during sleep is that your neural pathways are being pruned. So while you're sleeping, the brain kind of goes in and says, okay, well, these neural pathways are being used, so I'm going to strengthen them. And these neural pathways are not being used, so I'm going to prune back the cells, because the brain likes to be efficient. So it's going to prune back stuff that isn't being used. So if you have bad habits and you continue to do the bad habits, right, your mind is actually strengthening those pathways, because your brain doesn't know that they're bad. Your brain is just like, oh, well, these pathways are getting used. And that's why if you need to change a habit, you actually have to just change the behavior and leave the other things kind of the same, because it's already in your brain. You just have to make, you can't actually take it out of your brain. It's in there. So you just have to kind of modify it so that it works for you instead of against you. So sleep is really important, and people brag about not getting enough sleep. And really, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're less productive than you could be. I've started to kind of think about it as you have this 3 to 4 hour time period where you can be extremely concentratedly productive. And you can either be putting gas in that tank, or you can be taking it out. And if you are not sleeping enough, you are not filling up your tank. So if your full tank gets you 3 to 4 hours of concentrated work, and you don't have a full tank, you're not even getting the 3 to 4 hours of concentrated work that you wanted to get. Like, you don't even have that. And everything you do that kind of works against your brain, as you said, instead of for it, is going to drain that tank.
Yeah.
So for me, it would really learning about the fact that things happen subconsciously was huge, because I really thought everything was happening up here, and it's happening kind of underneath. And that also kind of explains why sometimes you do these things where your rational mind is like, yeah, you should really do this other thing, like eat an apple. And, you dive into a pint of ice cream, and an hour later, you're like, what happened? Your brain already was like, yeah, pint of ice cream, apple isn't going to cut it, because of various things are going on. And that's kind of what goes into the mindset stuff that I know you talk about, because when you have those blocks subconsciously, you can't get done what you need to get done. And if you're not aware that you have them, then you're just going to keep running your hamster wheel, again, very unproductive. So if there's beliefs or thoughts that you have that are subconscious that you're unaware of, they can actually prevent you from being as productive as you want. And then when you're not as productive as you want to be, that's when you're like working 12 hours a day and grind, not really getting anything done, because you're not being productive. You're just being busy, but now you're burning yourself out as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Wanted to take a quick break to share some exciting news. I'm excited to share the relaunch of my Transform Her program. This 90-day accelerator has been specifically redesigned to support those currently facing or considering a shift in life, career, or business. The 90-day accelerator is jam-packed with training, coaching, and a ton of personalized resources to move you from scared to confident, thinking about it to doing it, striving to thriving, and of course, stuck to unstoppable. So if you're at the place where you want to or are ready to make that major shift in your life, career, or business, but are feeling stuck, not sure where to begin, or are just scared, and trust me, there's nothing wrong with that, because we've all been there. You can learn more about the 90-day accelerator on my website at www.sabinegideon.com/transformher. On the site, you can schedule a complimentary call to see if the program is right for you. So much that you said there, in terms of our subconscious mind and the lack of awareness that many of us have around what's actually driving us, driving our decisions, driving our behaviors. One of the things that you mentioned was COVID gave you this opportunity to kind of step back and look at you, right? And really look at the subconscious activity that was happening, and recognizing you had these control issues. And for the first time in really everyone's lives, that reality that we are not in control in any capacity was an awakening for many of us. So I'm curious to know, for you personally, how has that shifted your view of your identity? How has that impacted how you see yourself and how you show up in the world?
That's a very deep question. Well, the main thing that I think I got from that was I was actually able to get a little bit closer to my authentic self, because, and you've worked in corporate, so you know how it is. Corporate America really puts pressure on you not to fail and not to make mistakes, which is extraordinarily unhelpful, given that we are human beings and we make mistakes. That's something that we do. That is as the programmers say, that's a feature, not a bug. That's just, it goes along with the whole human thing. So when you're working for a company And they're like, no, you can't make any mistakes or you'll get yelled at. You might get fired depending on the mistake. You get very, very nervous about trying new things and being afraid of failure. And that's hard as a business owner, right? Because you need to fail sometimes. And then I actually read something somewhere else where I was like, ooh, this is so true. And they said, if you launch a business and it doesn't work out, that is not equivalent to failure. It's just something that didn't work out. And so it's made me a lot easier on myself. I used to be one of these people who was I'm still hard on myself. I think a lot of women are like that, actually. But I am easier on myself than I have been in the past. And the other benefit that I'm sure everybody around me appreciates was that I was able to let some of these small things that would kind of annoy me go. Because in corporate, I always kind of felt like I had to have this facade of, competency and efficiency. Well, that's not a facade, but, you felt like you had to kind of maintain a certain way about you. And going off on my own, I was able to get rid of some of that. And then also getting rid of these control issues, really kind of coming to grips with the fact that I am going to make mistakes. And so I need to not beat the crap out of myself when I do, because then, I'm going to be pretty beaten up by the end of the day. So I think that's really, it's definitely opened me up, which in turn has allowed other people to open up to me. So I've had some really good talks with other people and really good calls, even people I don't know. We just clicked and started talking, and it's great. And it's not something that I don't think that would have happened a decade ago when I was still in corporate and still, before COVID.
Yeah. And you make several really, really good points there that stigma around failure and what that means, or making mistakes in corporate. And quite frankly, that narrative starts when we're in school, right? Like you do good, you get an A, you don't do good, you get an F, you get punished and whatnot. And so it just continues as we become adults in corporate, and depending on how long you're indoctrinated in that system, if you will, failure is like a 4-letter word, and the thing that people, tend to run away from. Whereas in entrepreneurship, it's, if you're not failing, you're not growing. It's almost like an expectation, and there's a process, and I'm sure you've experienced this. There's a process of reprogramming and retraining your mind, your beliefs. And so I find it fascinating that you started down this journey for clients, and it's kind of like the thing that has shifted and allowed you to show up and become a different person, or show up as a different person. And I love what you said about, in terms of as the person who you are today, right? You give yourself a lot more grace than you used to. It sounds like you give others a lot more grace than you probably would have, because you're giving yourself grace. And then certainly shedding the identities or the expectations and the image of what it means to be a professional and what it means to have it all together. And in doing so, it sounds like you're showing up as your authentic self, and you're attracting other people who, are equally as authentic. So that's amazing. That's awesome. So what are some tools that you use today or on a regular basis to maintain this healthy mindset that you've since adapted?
I do enjoy reading, not every day, but some positive or inspirational types of things. Especially, I've noticed that if I start feeling really irritated, or I'm driving and I'm really annoyed because it seems like there's traffic and I'm out in the Coachella Valley, and compared to LA, there is no traffic in the Coachella Valley. But if I start getting irritated about stuff like that, I know something is going on. And generally, whatever it is draining my tank. I don't always know what it is, or at least not right away, but I know that my tank is being drained. So I can think of, okay, what are some things that I do? One of the things that's just really super important, and I don't call it exercise, but movement, moving the body is so necessary. I actually have a sit-stand desk. I'm sitting now. When I write, I actually prefer to stand because I do find that I actually write faster when I stand. Go figure. And yeah, moving around. I don't call it exercise because we Americans tend to think of exercise as something that you get up and you go to the gym and you do something really unpleasant for some period of time, and then you come back and you sit on your sofa all day. And that's not how we evolved as humans. And so that's actually not that great for the body. So movement is not just about getting exercise, which is important, but also just moving around, parking farther away in the parking lot, all that stupid stuff. I take the stairs everywhere I go. If I can find a stairway, I will take the stairs, unless I have something like huge or bulky. So movement is super important. Your brain needs it. Your brain needs oxygenated blood. So if you're not moving, you're not actually thinking optimally either. So that's something you just, and everybody knows all the benefits that exercise brings. So I won't go into that, but that's just kind of a thing. I like to read. My mom was laughing at me because I told her I'd gone to Barnes & Noble with a gift card that my aunt had given me. And she said, I hope you bought some fun books. I'm a big fan of mysteries and thrillers, and I find reading very soothing. But I also bought a couple of books on economics and a couple of books on the brain, which are fun for me and not for anybody else. I get it, but
I love books on the brain too. So you're not alone.
Yeah. And the other thing that works really well, and I actually found that this was hard to get across to people in finance, and I don't know if it's just because they've been on email for so long. And that's really to batch your emails. So I had a tendency to check my email all the time. I disabled the pop-up so that I can't tell when a new email has come in. If I'm writing, I write a lot on Google Docs, so I am on the internet, but I turn off, I don't have my email tabs open. And really doing that. And as long as you tell clients that that's what you're doing, they're fine. There's just this belief out there that we have conditioned people, which we have, to be fair, that emails have to be responded to immediately. But it seems kind of silly, especially as a financial planner, because a lot of times your automatic response is, okay, I got to look into that. You're not getting to it right away anyway. So why am I interrupting my deep work to send a message that I could send through automation? Because I'm going to have to go look at it later anyway, because I can't do it right now. So I know people actually put in their email signature, these are the times that I check email during the day. So people know. And as long as people know, it's fine. Like nobody really minds. And if there's a true emergency, they can call you. And really getting away from that whole idea of, oh my God, an email came in, I have to respond to it. No, most of the time you don't. Not unless you're some kind of emergency person. Most of the time it can wait until you decide you want to look at your emails. I don't even open up my emails until I've had my focused work for the day, because mine occurs around like 9 to noon is roughly my time. So I won't even check it before I start. And then after I start, I'm like, okay, well, the focus time is gone. So now I can look at emails and deal with them, because now it's administrative email time.
Right. And so you've dropped a couple of really, really good nuggets there. Identifying or being so in tune with yourself so that you can catch yourself when you're frustrated. I love the whole analogy of, assessing, is my tank being drained, or what's draining my tank? And filling that back up with inspiration or reading, or movement. I think those three are huge. I was actually reading The One Thing by Gary Keller, I believe that's his name, recently. And that model that you just described is exactly what he talked about, right? First few hours of the day, first 4, I think he advocates for. That's where it's all your focus work. Then you take a break. Then you do kind of more of the like managed time, administrative stuff. And then you close out the day with some reflection on how the day went, and then maybe plan out your day for the next day. So again, as you were speaking, that's what it immediately took me to, that model.
Yeah, I do often recommend, especially for people that have kind of a hard time initiating, which has never just been a problem for me, but I know it is a problem for some people. One of the easiest ways to get around that is, at the end of the day, you look through and you say, okay, what are my 3 priorities for tomorrow? And that does a couple of things. For people that work from home, I recommend that they have end of the day rituals so that they can really separate work from home, because otherwise, when they start blending together, that's when you start getting a lot of burnout, because you're doing this at home and then you're doing work. So although sometimes I still will go back and work after I've had my end of day ritual, I'm very conscious that, okay, this is something that I wouldn't ordinarily do. This is not the best thing for me to do. I need to do it because I need to do it for whatever reason, but this is not a standard thing that I should be doing. So one of the shutdown rituals that I recommend is writing down your top 3 priorities. It's really hard to get a lot of stuff done in one day, a lot of good stuff. And if you want to be effective and productive, you really have to focus on that 20% of things that are going to give you that 80%, the Pareto principle. They're going to give you the 80% results. That's what you've got to focus on. And when you write them down at the end of the day, you kind of get them out of your brain. So that way you don't have to think about it for the rest of the night. Oh, did I do this? Did I do that? Your brain's like, oh, well, you wrote it down. It's on paper. It's good. And then you walk in the morning, you're like, oh, I know exactly what to do. I got my 3 priorities. I got to start working on them. And so that kind of helps people that have a little bit of difficulty getting themselves started when they tell themselves at the end of their previous day, okay, this is what I need to do tomorrow. And then you walk in the morning, you're like, I know what I'm doing. All right, I'm just going to get started on task number 1, and you go for it.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, the end of the day ritual has been, again, a game changer for me. I actually purchased this pad from this company called Knock Knock, and it's what to get done so I can have a drink. And it has your to do, it has your to buy, it has the contact, things to remember, things to delegate. But what's most important is it only gives you a few slots. So you can't write a list of like 25 things that you need to get done at the day. It forces you to, to really prioritize. But I can't tell you the days that I actually do it. And I wake up in the morning and here this thing is first thing on my desk. Like the day is so much more productive. I don't always necessarily have a drink after, but it feels good to be able to check off all of, the things that are on there and be like, okay, I did what I set out to do today. You mentioned something before around like when we sleep, our brain is, trying to filter through, okay, well, what are the good habits? Let's help her do more of those. What are the bad habits? Let's get rid of those. And I can imagine that having a routine, the end of the day routine, becomes something that now your brain is motivated to help you accomplish.
Exactly. And the more good habits that you have, the fewer decisions you have to make, because one of the huge tank drainers is the number of decisions. That's why Steve Jobs always wore the black turtleneck. That's why Barack Obama wore blue and gray suits. It's sort of a uniform that isn't a uniform, but it's just that's one less decision. And it's kind of the same thing if you make your decision that you're going to move somehow for an hour in the morning, and that gets to be a habit, and that's while it's developing into a habit, it's a decision. But then after that, the decision's kind of made, and now you can just go do what you're doing. So my end of day ritual, I don't drink alcohol. So I actually have a mocktail at the end of my day. And the funny thing is, there are so many non-alcoholic things out there that you can get. I mean, they have, and some of them are, but some of them are actually really quite good. So, because I've tried all these different ones out, and some of them I like, and some of them I don't. And let me just say, compared to like 15 years ago, there's so much more out there. So that even people who don't want to drink, if for whatever reason, you can get something and still kind of join in the fun of mocktail hour.
Yeah. And I just want to, I want to clarify, you do not have to drink at the end of the day if you check everything off your list. I've connected with people and they, they'll set a plan, and it might be something like, hey, I can go buy something that I've had in my cart in Amazon or on eBay, or, I can go get my nails done or something like that, right? It's about creating that reward system for yourself so that when you do get stuff done, you go reward yourself, your brain registers like, oh, this is a good thing. Like, she likes this. We feel good about this, so that it'll continue to help build momentum, of course, and then, continue to support you in getting what you need done.
Absolutely.
So I want to switch gears here a little bit. Yeah, going back to you. So, obviously you've navigated corporate, you're navigating entrepreneurship, you are going back into corporate to help teams and organizations. You've learned so much about yourself and why you make the decisions or have the behaviors, and now you're helping people do the same. Looking back, or from where you sit today, if you were to look back and were able to share something with your younger self, what would you share with the young JJ that, would be life-changing or would help her?
Yeah, young JJ was a mess, I got to say. And I definitely, I have to say that I absolutely feel that I would not be where I am today had I not had all those previous experiences, had I not been such a mess when I was younger. I think that's absolutely led to the person that I am today. We all make bad decisions when we're young, right? So the key is not to beat yourself up about them. And actually, that's probably what I would tell my younger self, is just stop beating yourself up so much.
I love that, that's what you would share with her, is stop beating yourself up. As you've learned in the last year or so, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. We're allowed to make mistakes. We're not infallible as human beings. So that's great advice for young JJ, and that's great advice for older Sabine and anyone else in between. So thank you for sharing that. So as we wrap up here, JJ, where can our audience connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably at this point the easiest way. So I actually am on there as Jennifer JJ Jank. And I have the words productivity queen in my bio. So if you also search productivity queen, you'll come up with me.
As far as anything that you'd like to share with the audience in terms of ways to connect with you or ways to work with you?
Oh, yeah. So I do have a website, but right now it's kind of in a bit.ly form. So I think it's easier if people just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. And typically what I'm doing is I'm working with teams of about a half dozen to maybe a couple dozen, where the business owner really wants to grow the team or grow their business, scale up in some way. And they just don't feel like their team is productive enough. And they may love the people that they have, but they might have some issues with people not being self-starters, or just they're afraid that by taking on more work that their people are going to burn out. And so I go in there as a consultant and I do a workshop and also kind of come around for the accountability 3 weeks and 6 weeks after the workshop, just to see where people have fallen off the wagon and see if they need some help tweaking something. So that way they can work smarter. And so the business owner can then scale up without worrying that they're going to burn their people out.
I can imagine that in this time, especially with, remote work and office reentries and all of this change and shift that's happening in the workplace, that there are a lot of people who need that type of support. So certainly if you or someone is in that boat where you're definitely looking to increase the productivity, certainly reach out to Jennifer. The link to connect with her on LinkedIn, as well as her website, and her resources are listed in the show notes. So please be sure to check that out. Any final words or any final thoughts that you want to share, JJ, before we wrap up here?
Well, I did want to thank you, Sabine, for having me on. You and I had a great talk the other day, and I really enjoyed it. You're one of those people that I just felt like I really clicked with very quickly. So it was very, very exciting to be invited on your show. I would also invite other people. We have this idea that, and I think especially a lot of ambitious and driven women especially have this idea that if we beat ourselves up enough, that that will spur us on to achieve our goals. And yeah, actually that's wrong. Giving ourselves more grace, as you say, giving ourselves a little bit more leeway, taking it easy and understanding it, letting yourself fall and then picking yourself back up without yelling at yourself is actually more motivating. And so I would invite people that kind of feel like they need to give themselves a kick in the rear to get going, to say, is that really what I need? Or would dangling a carrot in front of my face, in front of, if I check off my stuff, I get to have a mocktail, would that work better?
Right. So again, please connect with JJ on LinkedIn. I connected with JJ on LinkedIn and we got, to talking, and here we are today. Let her know that you heard about her on the Journey to Becoming podcast. Don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions. She, as you can tell, is full of insight, full of wisdom, and more than happy to share and support. So again, JJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sabine.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you were able to grab a few nuggets and some action items that you can begin implementing this week. I'll be back next week with some more actionable tips to help you along your journey of transition, change, and transformation. In the meantime, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment on the platform of your choosing. And if you really enjoyed this content, go ahead and share it with your network. Share it with a friend, a family member, whoever it is you know that might benefit from the information that was shared today. Until next time, have a wonderful and purposeful week.